Welcome back to Move Better, everyone. Today I have with me Dr. Kevin McGovern, who's a physical therapist and the owner creator of Velocity RX, which is a pit. You're going to explain it better for baseball players to prevent pitching injuries and improve your velocity with pitching. Kevin and I are colleagues from the Central Mass area, and we both went to Northeastern. So I love having Huskies on
Go Huskies.
the program. So welcome, Kevin. Let's talk a little bit about how you got here, to creating Velocity RX, and what's your background, and tell me more.
All right. Well, thank you, Laura, for having me. I appreciate that. So yeah, my name is Dr. Kevin McGovern. I have a cash-based or fee-for-service practice in Acton, Massachusetts. It is my second go around. I had an insurance-based practice called McGovern Physical Therapy for many, many moons that I sold back in 2013 or 14. And that was the dawning of basically two things that I do now, which is the Velocity RX, which is a baseball pitching program, and all kind of centered or started from my G.A.M.E, which is my movement intervention or not invention. So way back when, obviously you and I went to the best PT school around. So when I started to hire other PTs, I realized that we all passed the same board exam, but people had certain schools definitely had different focuses on what was going on. I kind of noticed that. And, at the end of the day, back then, insurance regulation was really getting heavy. And, we really had to fight very, very hard to get more visits for our patients, right? And we really treated in teams. So, to keep access. So if someone didn't work Tuesday afternoon, but the patient could only come in, we treated. So we really needed an exam to kind of keep everyone on the same page. And there wasn't any. There's like the FMS and all these other exams, but Granny couldn't do that, right? Granny can't sit and do a full squat with her arms over her head. So I kind of needed something, and I didn't find it. So we kind of created our own, which which was originally called the McGovern Movement Screen, just because I'm egotistical, but it has evolved. After I started some strength and conditioning center, so it has evolved into G.A.M.E, which stands for Graded Active Movement Exam, and it is copywritten. And now I actually score it, and it is really basically right after kinesiology, like what's supposed to move. It's really about the sequence of movement that every single person has. Shaquille O'Neal, you, Granny, everyone has to get out of a chair, and there's a certain sequence. And in my opinion, there's only one sequence, right? There's only one way you're supposed to move. Everything after that is wrong. And the test has gone through many different things. Oh, let's give half credit, but now it's just like it's scored pass or fail. So that's kind of how the evaluative tool of my practice.
Awesome. So what is included in that, besides get out
Yeah,
of the
so
chair?
it's 7 tests. I have more, but this is 7. There's a couple of prerequisites. So things that people have to do that be able to contract their core and even get out of a chair. With some people, if they're very injured, can't even take the test. The test has never been passed the first time because no one actually moves correctly. But there's 3 tests for the upper extremities and 4 tests essentially for the lower extremity. But I didn't invent squat and lunge. They're on there. Single leg deadlift or golfer's lift. And I've got a couple of shoulder tests that are kind of unique to me. One I call this free throw test. But really, again, it's just measuring the sequence of movement, and then that parlays into the Velocity RX program.
So, obviously, the game method is, or game evaluation. Is it a
G.A.M.E test, yes,
game
yeah,
test? Yes.
yeah.
You can use that on everyone, and then
Everybody,
you
yeah.
get specific in that kind of transition into the Velocity RX. So, how is that more specific on? I mean, is that just for baseball players, or?
Baseball or softball, really, or overhand throwing athletes. So like everything, like I kind of fell into that. Back in 2006, I began treating this minor league baseball player, had some elbow issues, and he got released from the Dodgers, but was living out here. And then he hooked on with what's called an independent baseball team, which is, not part of Major League Baseball, but still minor league, where a lot of guys who are cut from the major league go and play in these leagues. And there's a team in Nashua, which former Red Sox manager Butch Hobson was the manager at that time. And there's all these pitchers, and at those 2 years that I was there were, I think, 12 pitchers who had seen major league time and a couple more that were drafted very, very high, all out of baseball for arm injuries. So when I began working with them, just, I was a pitcher myself until I was about 43 years old. I tried to play a little bit at Northeastern, but they said I wasn't really good enough. That's fine. I don't hold a grudge. But so I began to see all these players, right? And they began, I'm like, well, show me what your program is, because I'm interested in what, like, hey, could I steal something for the Yankees or the Dodgers? And Laura, when I tell you that I would do exactly the opposite of what they were doing, I am not lying. Like, they were doing shoulder shrugs and stuff and all these things, and I'm like, oh my God, no wonder you're out of baseball, because this is exactly the opposite of what I would do. And that's really kind of part of which how I fell into it. And then getting back to my amateur career as a baseball pitcher, I made a throw across the diamond in a nice warm 38-degree April day, and I actually tore my ulnar collateral ligament of my right elbow, which still is torn. I never got it repaired, and I pitched for another 20 years after that. So I had to teach myself how to throw without hurting my elbow again. And that's kind of how I fell into this Velocity RX program, which is really designed for anybody to get them to throw correctly, because there's a lot of very bad information out there, and the incident of injuries is like through the roof.
Yeah, and the UCL injury is
Yep.
pretty common in the baseball pitchers, especially, right?
There were more, I think, in 2021. It was 2020 with the pandemic, the stats are a little off. So in 2021, there were more pitchers in the major leagues on the disabled list, just pitchers, than there were total injuries in the National Football League.
Wow.
Yes, and it's almost double. It's not even close.
Wow.
So, and that's just at the major league level. So at the youth level, I mean, I've seen ulnar collateral ligaments, but at this young age, they're really growth plate injuries, because their ligaments, their elbows have formed as young as 10.
Wow.
And I've seen two gals. I've seen two softball players with UCL injuries. So
Now, is that
it's really
because their pitching is completely different? But is it the same? I guess is
no, it is. You're right. It's 100% different, because they are throwing it underhand. But what they are doing is, if the girl plays different positions, like if the day she doesn't pitch, she plays the outfield. They are doing, again, with social media, it's bad. They're doing men's training for gals, and it is different. So they're doing long toss, all these, like, what we call running guns. The girls will run up and throw it as hard as they can, which I'm completely against. And, you know, we posture is so important in throwing, and posture is so important in all movement. Um, women have things in the front of them that men don't have, that get, they tend to be more rounded, and the more rounded they get, that puts their arm in a different position, and they actually become more susceptible to UCL injuries than men, just from a postural standpoint. So it really is an epidemic. That is, the solution is very simple. It's just a couple sequencing things, and obviously cleaning up their movement is a big part of it.
so. How do you do that, or how do through, obviously you're doing your assessment,
Mm-hmm.
and then so someone comes in with, we call them forward shoulders and elevated shoulders, or forward head, because if we're looking just upper body, but I know that
Yep.
you also incorporate upper body, doesn't just affect what's happening as you pitch or throw, it's a
Correct.
whole body approach. So dive into what Velocity RX looks like, and how you incorporate that?
Sure. It's very simple. I really say that human movement is a bunch of Lego blocks, right? We have to start with Lego block number one. If that's wrong, the whole model's wrong, right? So I really have three Lego blocks or three pillars of movement. Scapular depression, which is the ability to pull our shoulder blades down. When we lift our arm up, as you and I know, our shoulder blade is to depress, kind of like a cease to really, for people listening, it's like a seesaw. As my hand goes up, my shoulder blade goes down. But in 99% of the population, when my hand goes up, my shoulder blades become earrings. So scapular depression. The second is squatting, right? To move from our center back. We lift our leg up, we're sitting or getting into that hip. Most people, the first thing they do is they bend their knee over their toe, right? So pitchers, and they lose balance. And the third is walking. And what I mean by that is all rotary sport is walking, meaning I'm turning from my belly button. If I'm facing north and you tell me dinner is east, I'm immediately turning my belly button and going that way. But when we have all these other things that aren't working, that tight rotary movement of our spine becomes this beach ball or this parabola, and it really throws our timing off, and it throws our efficiency off and our velocity off, because there's the reason why people injure their UCL is they violate the rule of gravity, is that they're accelerating their arm not last in the kinetic chain, like tennis players, right? They serve the ball. The last thing they do is hit down on the ball. You never see a tennis player with a Tommy John surgery, right? I mean, the ones that are getting tennis elbow, that has to do with vibration and the strings, but no one's hurting their UCL because they're accelerating their arm last. Whereas you'll see baseball pitchers, they'll throw their whole weight of their body first, and they'll leave that arm back there, and that arm has to work up against gravity and then down. And it's that point of up against gravity. And you can take every pitcher who's ever injured themselves and film, and right as they're going up against gravity is when they blow their elbow or their shoulder.
So with that injury, are you going to focus on your obvious? Because I'm going to look at shoulder stability, like you said, the scapula and how much shoulder range of motion they have. Is that where you start, is looking at the scapula, and then?
Yeah, so I'm running on, the two movements of the upper extremity for the G.A.M.E test is really kind of, we're doing like this jumping jack movement, right? So I'm looking at where their shoulders moving. The first initial movement we see in most people is to shrug, right? So then and there, I don't need to see anything else, because that's Lego block one. It's wrong. It's opposite, right? So we've got to start with, foam roller, scapular depression exercises. Sometimes I've got to get in and manipulate the spine and get the thoracic spine moving. And once that happens, you'll get, free motion of the shoulder. And then, so I'm looking there. I really could start it with two tests, which is, that test and then a squat test, which is part of it. And you'll see people, I could squat 400 pounds. They move their knees first. They lose their lordosis of their back. I mean, I think squat, you can probably agree, this is probably one of the most poorly performed and poorly instructed movement in mankind. Like you'll see, oh, well, Muscle and Fitness says to do it this way, and I'm like, no, see toddler, okay, see the 2-year-old. That's how you squat. And
I think it's probably it's a ridiculously complicated movement that we try to make simple by and then adding load to it before you're ready to own the movement.
And that's the whole social media. These kids are out trying to outdo each other on TikTok videos. And I mean, I've seen compression like this year alone, I've seen probably 2 15-year-olds with compression fractures of their back, like stuff that we never saw 20 years ago, because kids weren't doing that. Now they're, hey, here's me, everything about me. Here's me doing my squat with 400 pounds. And I'm like, oh my God, you're hurting yourself. And, getting a personal training degree 20 years ago was a lot harder, or certificate. Now you can get it online with a couple of clicks. and or some kids are just doing it completely unsupervised and they're hurting themselves, and that's the sad part. So sometimes I've got to clean that up before they're even able to go and pitch. And then of course we have the helicopter parents who are like, well, can he pitch Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday 2024, right?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Like it's just like, and I always say, look, little Johnny can't get a college scholarship at 13, but he can blow one, right? Like, and it's so that's the other part of the battle. But a lot of parents buy in and they see the result. I mean, I've had crazy stuff, 7, 8 miles an hour of velocity gains in 5 or 6 weeks. It's pretty crazy by just really perfecting their movement and fixing their mechanics.
I want to dive more into like the injuries now that will stop you from later, but just to, like, you're not saying kids shouldn't lift. Like it's okay for kids to lift, but and this is across the board, kids or granny, if you can do the movement correctly and you have good motor control and
Mm-hmm.
you're able to control your body and your positioning is right and all those things fit together, then you can add load to that. But otherwise, you're just adding load to dysfunction and it creates more dysfunction and problems. And that's when the injuries come in. Is that
1,000%. I'm a huge Olympic lifting proponent, but it has to be done with the utmost precision or you're going to get hurt. You know, most kids now, their body weight is enough, but I understand everyone's trying to compete. But I've really never seen someone come in my office and do a perfectly loaded squat. It is, like you said, it's such a complicated movement that we can spend hours on
right?
foot placement and all that kind of stuff of where it should be. But yes, once someone is doing it correctly, load, force, all that comes into play. Absolutely.
And so getting into like and progressing and getting them back into the field or back into lifting or wherever they're going, there are things to do to break it down. Like you can, there's an argument to be made that single leg exercises are going to be better than a double leg squat, and they're 10 times harder because it's a single leg.
Mm-hmm.
But that you're going to develop more force and I would think that would translate. You're doing either a single leg squat on the left leg or a deadlift. I like the deadlift. I think that's an easier
Mm-hmm.
one to coach than single leg squat, or for girls at least. I think it is to
Right.
an extent. Will correlate with the opposite shoulder and that rotary stuff. So how are you incorporating? How are you progressing them, or like what kind of things are you doing to
Yeah,
get?
so my regimen, I start them off in sitting. I have something called literally a catcher squat that they're literally getting into. A lot of people will lose, they can't get their trunk forward enough over their toes. And the biggest thing I say is, and I see is that they can't keep that lordotic posture. So I literally have going with the baseball feel, I have something called a catcher squat where they're like sitting on a 24-inch box and they're literally lifting off 1 millimeter, just unweighting their glutes. People have such a hard time doing that. They'll feel their quad. So getting that feel, then I'm moving foot position. So we can go straight, 10 and 2, sumo. And I've got some crazy stuff for a martial arts cross stance squat where they're literally crisscrossing their feet. But then I have them doing Karate Kid, what I call a crane martial art, where they're essentially, bringing like the Karate Kid of lifting from their hip flexor. So, because really, when you talk about an athlete, it's really if you have a high speed camera and we take all these pictures, I want to pull out the movement where there's compensatory movements and shorten it so we can go from like essentially a lunge to a march to a hip with one movement, right? That movement flow and take out because no one moves correctly, but your professional athletes have much better compensatory skills, so they can get around it. But when we really talk movement, is getting it free flowing and going from point A to point B like that and smooth and so all that gets incorporated and you'll see their mechanics just like change and just like, oh my God, like, and all we did was work on lunge, squat, and hip flexors. That's it. And that changes everything about even their upper body because their base is so much better.
So what how long does a rehab that's a loaded question. How long does a rehab process take? Someone comes to you with I mean, is that what you see mostly? So you saw some compression fractures.
Yeah, I'll see half and half. I'll see post injury and then I'll see, like help, like fix me. I want to gain velocity. Um, you know, in a gross motor, I'd say it would take me about 10 sessions where I'd feel comfortable. But I have clients that are like year long that I'm constantly, that we're doing little tweaks, right? Can I take you from a white belt to a purple belt and you're able to pitch? Yeah, but we talk about getting from purple to black. We're really talking about refining the movement. Something that was okay when you were learning the movement is not okay now because we can do it that much better. Because at the end of the day, my pitchers from 45 feet, I want them to hit the strike zone 7 out of 10 times blindfolded. We do a lot of work with it because you can't be thinking about your mechanics on the mound. People are yelling at you, the other team's yelling, your mom's yelling at you, your father's pissed at you. So we
Yeah.
want to be able to have them feel it and to, be centered and with themselves to be able to do it blindfolded. I wouldn't recommend them doing that in a game, but you'd be surprised sometimes people are after they can relax, move so much better blindfolded that they just feel it better because their eyes kind of like play tricks on us. But yeah, that's the end result is blindfolded strikes.
That's I think I don't ever think to, in my head I think, okay, we got to put in a different stimulus, but I don't ever think about taking away a stimulus, like blindfold,
Yeah.
or even wearing a headset or blocking out noise
Hmm.
canceling stuff, in training. And I think it's important, because it puts you into real life situation too, but
Yeah, when I stopped killing my knees and I couldn't play basketball anymore for exercise, I took up Kempo Jiu-Jitsu martial arts probably back 2003 or 2004, and really the study of martial arts has made me a much better therapist, especially when we talk about movement flow and getting rid of a sense. We're doing a drill where you're fighting four people with your eyes closed. You really have to feel where you're at, and um, so yeah, it definitely helps taking away a sense.
do you have space in your, like, where you train people that you can have them throw 45 feet and be
Yeah, well, not for
blindfolded and not?
yeah, so that's a great question. So I have about 40 feet of turf, but the net and the targets are positioned as if they're throwing to 60. I have um this company called Diamond Kinetics makes a computerized baseball that weighs the same but gives me all this readout, gives me velocity, what's called spin rate, how many revolutions it's going and how it's going, how it moves. So even in that space, I don't need a full mound to be able to do, which is pretty cool.
And it's computerized. It's not it's very like an
Yeah.
AI thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like the ball and it hooks up to your iPhone or any phone, I guess, and it'll give you a digital readout. And so for each kid or person or a guy, gal, I'll be able to keep stats on them as they go. So I'll usually do after I feel comfortable with their mechanics that they're not going to hurt themselves, I'll take an initial velocity reading and then every so often we'll take another one because everyone velocity are like the beach muscles. Everyone's into the velo, man. So,
Yeah,
but I'll give that, we'll take all those right in my office. So it's good. And the ball is pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. Within a mile an hour or two. It's pretty good.
it's pretty cool. It's very,
Yeah.
very
Yeah, it's a
current.
for I think it's $129. They run out from if you spike it into the ground after a while, you need to get another one, but they're not bad.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so how do um, how are people coming to find you, and how are they, like, so someone, you mostly see people in town, or you like, and are you
Yeah, it's a great. So yeah, right now I see people at my office, and they can find me at my website at perfectmotionsportstherapy.com. But I'm working to go virtual. So I'm working on a course that Velocity RX will be a corrective exercise and mechanical course. That'll be the lead into my program. And I'll have a few tiers that will actually have a mastermind group where there'll be by twice a month, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, whatever it is, calls. And those calls will be going over different exercises, film study, breaking it down so people can see maybe, a couple of people submit their films and we do like a film study. And then the top tier will be, where I'll be someone's pitching agent, where um, it'll really be a lot of no's. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Or, looking and saying, look, your arm is here. Get whoever you're working with to get your arm here. So, to kind of give assessments to keep with the whole premise and purpose of keeping them on the field healthy. Because what I usually say is if you have a bad hitting instructor, you go 0 for 15 in your tournament on the weekend. If you have a bad pitching instructor, you end up in the OR. And that's pretty much what, there's no two ways about it. That's the blunt, honest truth. So I'm trying to keep kids out of the OR because like Tommy John surgery is like, yep, got the TJ already. We're good. Like that's insane. And I've had people ask about elective Tommy John surgery. That's how crazy it's gotten. Oh yeah.
Why would you choose to
Uh,
have an elective
because
Tommy John?
because when they do it, um, they they'll triple the thickness of the ligament because they take that what's your palmaris longus, and people like, let's just get it done. If everyone's going to have it, and it's just insane. And the other sad part is everyone's measuring all this stuff. Oh, we're measuring the mechanics, but no one's actually doing anything to fix the mechanics. So I don't know if people don't want to step out of the line and be like, to me, it's just like, dude, throw with gravity. Don't throw against it. You're going to lose. Maybe I've just oversimplified it, but I mean that's pretty much what it is.
Well, my quick question, I think, is if you that seems like that's a massive change from how throwing has been taught and has been
Thousand
done for
percent.
forever. And so I would think that the question, like, why am I going to change it? Because this is how it's supposed to be done. And so if I change it, I'm not going to be able to throw as quickly and as efficiently and accurately. Um, and the back to back up a little bit, the on the elective surgery, like we can see, and I don't know exactly what Chris Sales's injuries are, but
Mm-hmm.
competitively, I don't know if he's had multiple Tommy John surgeries, but something goes on with his elbow
Every
every
time.
year, and so it doesn't fix the problem. It's correcting the structural problem, but it's not fixing
It's
why that happened. And I think
it's
the huge thing is fix why it's happening.
it's so great that you brought that up. So also back in 2006, I started predicting baseball players that would unfortunately injure their elbow. And I was right up until Chris Sale because I thought Chris Sale, because if you look at pick, he just must have unbelievable flexibility of his ligaments. I had picked him back in 2020 or 19 or whatever it was. So it took 2 years for it to finally hurt himself. But yeah, you will get, first of all, the original Tommy John, okay, back in 1974 was back. He threw 200. He missed a year, and then he came back and threw 257 innings. We would assume the surgery is a little bit better than it was in 1974. Yet the rehab time is doubled or even tripled because of what you said. They're not fixing the problem. So now we have, Tommy John was just like 5'10" frumpy guy. Now you've got guys 6'4", 6'5", these horses, but they're still throwing with the same bad technique, but they're can bench press the entire dugout, and that's the problem. Bigger, stronger, faster guys on the same bad mechanic, and nobody wants to change the mechanics, and I have no idea why, because it is in my opinion, the main cause of every single injury.
Yeah.
Because you look back in guys in yesteryear throwing 300 innings a year, 20 complete games. I mean, Jim Palmer in the Orioles back in the 70s had 5 years in a row where he threw over 20 complete games. I don't think there were 20 complete games in the entire American League last year. So it's a whole different animal. So it's
Correct
insane.
mechanics, people. That's a big thing. That's, and I think that's across the board.
Especially at a young age, especially
Yep.
when you can do it,
Yeah.
when you can really learn movement at 10, 11, 12. Don't wait until you're 17,
Right.
you know?
And this is not to throw parents under the bus because I'm not a parent, so I'm not criticizing you, but I do think, the culture, and I don't know that I think parents are the symptom. I think the culture comes from, uh, I don't know, I can't blame NCAA, pros, whatever. Like it's trickle down. It's from the
hmm
top down that, little John wants to become the major league pitcher. And
hmm
so what are they going to do? They get into, and I don't, is baseball year round uh like like
Well,
soccer,
people start to
cheerleading?
train. Yeah, people are training year round for sure now because now the dawning or the really influx of travel ball where it
Yeah.
is a whole year. Whether they might not be playing games, but certainly training year round a lot, a
Yeah.
lot.
And so are you seeing, like you had talked about helicopter parents and parents that are like pushing for their 13-year-old son to get a college scholarship, not thinking about the long-term consequences of that. How do you work with them? Because I think that's, I mean, it's not just, and it's not just baseball parents, not, it's, we all want our youth to be able to do what they love for their life. And college is expensive and
Mm,
you have to be top tier to play D1, but then top, more top, higher than the top, top of the proof to be professional. And
sure.
how do you get there if you don't start training young and you're not, and if they're having, if you want to be able to compete, like with cheerleading, if you're on an all-star team, they compete year round.
hmm
They have tryouts in May, they start training like through the summer, and then they compete September through April. And if you want to compete at the top form so that you're ready for college and you have these skills, then you have to be involved in that year
hmm
round. But it's detrimental. So how do you draw the line, or how do you and I understand, so I understand where parents are coming from, and sort of coaches, because the coaches of the gyms want to keep their programs going and keep their athletes involved in the game. But how do we affect that positively without changing massive culture that's there? Because I think that's a huge, I don't think that's,
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
hate to use like a catchphrase, but follow the science, right? You
Mm.
have a lot of people in our space that should not be in our space, right? The qualifications of a pitching instructor has been, well, I played minor league ball in the Carolinas league, but you couldn't tell me a glute medius from an upper trap, right? So you don't know human movement. And again, a lot of parents, not all, but a lot of them chase the shiny object. Oh, well, you say little Johnny should be out for 6 weeks, but Brett, the pitching instructor, says pain is okay, just take Advil.
Yeah.
Like, no. So there is a lot of that. It's really only through results and education that you can be like, look, here's the result. This is what we've done. You just have to let it go through its process. But um, dealing with parents is hard. I've had, and I'm sometimes be like, I don't want to be, I told you so, but I told you so. But
Yeah.
there are a lot who don't listen. Not all, but there are some who are living through their kids. I'm sure you see it, right?
Yep. Yep.
And they yeah, I just can't emphasize enough on the nastiness of that surgery, the nastiness of the growth plate injury, and and baseball. Most of the kids who play in the Little League World Series that we all like to watch in August. Oh, look at the little kid, and more than half of those kids never even end up playing high school baseball, right? Because they go from that 12-year-old to 13, the bigger diamond, they hit puberty, and then all kinds of things happen. And that's really that 11 to 13-year-old kid is really what this whole program is built around, is really the danger zone. You really, really have to be, as a trainer, on top of your game, because one day in the spring you could be looking at little Johnny at 5'4", and then come September he's 6 feet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there you've got to adapt to that. And in order to adapt to that, you have to be highly skilled at what you do. That doesn't mean that you chew tobacco and sunflower seeds in a dugout somewhere.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents on that.
I mean, that's not the healthy way to get there.
No, well, I mean it is, but it's
Sunflower
not.
seeds might be okay, but yeah.
That just doesn't mean that you know everything about,
Right. Right.
and just because you have the more followers on TikTok or Instagram does not mean that means you're a great marketer. Great, I'll tip your hat, but can you fix a growth plate? Do you even know what a growth plate is? You know what I mean?
Right. And why is that important? Yeah,
And
but
why that is
yeah.
important. 100%. Yes.
Uh, I think what the program, the Velocity RX program is going to be great because it's not just a rehab program to get better from an injury, but there's a component of that. But it sounds like let's start young, let's start
Mhm.
teaching them so that they can learn to do this correctly
Yep.
and build resiliency for the long haul. I think
Yep.
that's the key thing, that and that's what parents want, is for their
Hmm.
kids to be able to play for the long haul, and um and enjoy the process and feel good in the process. And nobody wants to go into surgery, no,
Mm.
what whole even elective surgery.
Right. Yeah. Nobody wants that.
Right.
And
um
part of this too, there's you may have heard of pitch count. When someone
yeah.
gets to a certain number, you pull them out. Well, my other podcast I do, my buddy, we've collaborated and have a new pitch count quotation or strategy in which we're doing movement and functional tests between innings, because one pitch could be bad, right? But 50 pitches might not be bad. So it's just not the number. The number is a false narrative. It has to be part of the number and movement. And we've created something I think is pretty neat that we'll be teaching the coaches. Also, the coaches can take a course to keep their kids safe.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm
Yeah,
excited. So we'll dive into that more next time.
absolutely. Awesome.
I think the key on the pitch count and the fatigue, which I'm really glad that you're looking for, is like our bodies, your brain, your motor control, your body, when it will fatigue at some point, and it
Hmm.
may be 1 rep or it may be 50 reps, and it's going to depend on where you are, how you slept the night before, what your nutrition's like, how you're hydrated, and did you just tweak your neck a little bit, that it's
Hmm.
going to throw your shoulder off. So there's a lot more involved than just the number of repetitions in anything that you do, whether it's pitching, or lifting, or taking a walk. So
1,000%.
yeah. Kevin, where can people reach you, and how can they learn more about Velocity RX and all of that stuff?
Yeah,
And
the best place is through my website. All my social media is there. So that's perfectmotionsportstherapy.com. And you'll see a page dedicated to Velocity RX. You can text me through that and everything. That's how you can get a hold of me.
awesome. And then you have 2 podcasts, did you say?
Yeah, so I've got a baseball. So I've got a Prove It Live. You can proveitlive.com. That's a baseball physical therapy mesh. And then I just started, which you'll be an upcoming guest on, the Game Show, which is not about Wheel of Fortune or Match Game. It's about functional movement and physical therapy, and kind of educating the public on movement. And I'm bringing in guests that deal in movement, and you'll be one of my guests very soon.
Awesome. Well, I very much look forward to that. I
Awesome.
like movement. So thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
And everybody check out Kevin's stuff, and all the links will be in the show notes. Don't forget, when in doubt, breathe it out, take life one step at a time, and go have a great day.